welcome. I'm Tiffany Wong, and here's what happened this week. China has released 4 crew members of a Taiwanese fishing boat detained for more than a month after entering Chinese waters. But the boat's captain is still in detention in China. It's just one of a spate of recent incidents that have raised tensions in the waters between Taiwan and China. Louise Watt reports.
After 6 weeks being held in China, 1 Taiwanese and 3 Indonesian fishers are on their way back to Taiwan. They were taken in a small boat from a port in China to the median line of the Taiwan Strait. That's the unofficial boundary between Taiwan and China and where the handover happened. They were detained by China's Coast Guard at the beginning of July near Taiwan's outlying islands of Jinmen. The Chinese Coast Guard says they were in Chinese waters and they were breaking a seasonal ban on fishing in the area and using illegal fishing nets. Taiwan recognized that the boat crossed into Chinese waters, but it said it was unusual for fishing boats to be treated in this way, and it suggested that the response from the Chinese side was heavy-handed. This is just one of a series of incidents that have escalated tensions in the waters between China and Taiwan. In February, 2 Chinese fishers drowned in Taiwanese waters after being chased by the Taiwanese Coast Guard. 2 weeks ago, their bodies and boat were returned to China. Soon after that, China released a Taiwanese fisher it had held for more than 4 months. So on the one hand, it appears that tensions are easing. On the other hand, both sides have been ramping up maritime security in the wake of these incidents, and Taiwan accuses China of normalizing Coast Guard patrols around Jinmen. And in this incident, although the 4 fishers are on their way back to Taiwan, the captain and their boat remain in Chinese custody, an ongoing headache for Taiwanese officials. Joseph Wu and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
That was security analyst Aaron Matthew Lariosa speaking with Jaime Okan. A number of corruption scandals have been dogging former presidential candidate Ko Wen-je and others from his Taiwan People's Party in recent weeks. As Chris Gorin reports, it marks a turning point for a politician once seen as a rising alternative to the political status quo.
Aaron, I want to first start off with asking you, how dangerous was this incident where this Chinese aircraft launched flares so close to the Philippine aircraft?
There's a pretty big escalation by the Chinese in regards of incidents, and it could be argued that this is part of the trend that we've been seeing since last fall, where the Chinese slowly step up their assertiveness and their aggressive actions against Philippine assets, whether that be aircraft or vessels. The aerial stuff takes kind of a backseat compared to the maritime incidents where we see more severe incidents. But the videos we've seen, right, really drastic change of pace. Chinese aircraft dropping flares and doing evasive maneuvers or disruptive maneuvers in front of other aircraft is not a new thing. I believe there was a recent incident earlier this year with an Australian aircraft, a helicopter. So, it's just very concerning regarding the Philippine scenario.
Do you think the Philippines is concerned that tensions in the South China Sea, which are usually between ships, is not going to spread between aircraft in the skies?
For sure, that's actually been something that's actually been something that's been on the table, especially when we talk about maritime cooperative activity. So that's basically the term for joint patrols between Manila and other partners such as Canberra, Tokyo, Ottawa now, and now Washington. So that when you bring in aircraft into the equation, the Chinese will probably get up there, as we've seen across the in the Pacific. So the main issue, of course, with the Philippines is if it really expands to this domain, how exactly do you counter that? We've seen a lot of hard-learned lessons from Taiwan, right? Where like ROCAF gets a bit exhausted because they have to keep getting their planes up and meeting these guys. And when we look at the Philippine aerial domain capabilities, right? They only have 12 fighter jets. Their radar coverage is very limited. How exactly do you counter these? And that's a challenge that Manila might have to start thinking about going forward, especially after this incident.
This incident happens at the same time that China and the United States are conducting separate exercises. Do you think we're going to see a trend where both sides kind of feel that the South China Sea is too small to operate in this waterway?
For sure, that's a big concern. But right now, the prerogative is everything at Manila's pace. So these joint patrols all come at the discretion of Manila. And definitely there are measures the United States could do to support that, whether it be, found ops in the area or just doing their own air and maritime activities. As we've seen recently, $500 million in aid to the Philippines. So that's a big, and they explicitly said that's focusing on getting the Philippines to defend its sovereignty, specifically the Philippine military and the Philippine Coast Guard. So there's a lot of initiatives we could see where these, it might be like these two big powers clambering around the South China Sea.
That was security analyst Aaron Matthew Lariosa speaking with Jaime Ocon. A number of corruption scandals have been dogging former presidential candidate Ko Wen-je and others from his Taiwan People's Party in recent weeks. As Chris Gorin reports, it marks a turning point for a politician once seen as a rising alternative to the political status quo.
我也要向支持者和合作的厂商鞠躬道歉。
A public apology from the campaign finance chief of former presidential candidate Ko Wen-je in response to allegations of corruption. The campaign now says that it misreported expenses totaling more than $500,000. In one example, more than $150,000 were marked as being paid to a public relations company, which the company says it never received. The campaign also failed to report revenue from a concert ostensibly held as a fundraiser, which it now says was a purely commercial event. In total, the campaign says 17 expenses were misreported, blaming the errors on an outside accountant. Ke, a former Taipei mayor and head of the Taiwan People's Party, is standing behind his team.
我们现在所有的支出，你知道，都有凭证，都用在选举相关的事务。更重要的，他没有跑到任何个人的口袋里面。我也保证，我们一定会继续努力，我们不会被任何挫折击垮的。
It's just one of several corruption scandals hanging over the party. Peng Zhengsheng, deputy mayor of Taipei under Ke, has been barred from leaving the country after he and Ke were implicated in a suspicious real estate deal dating from their time in office. It's been a difficult 6 months for a politician once seen as a rising star and disruptor of the country's two-party status quo.
And so he initially politically debuted in 2014. He framed himself as a beyond blue-green distinctions. And in this way, he benefited from being independent at a time in which the public seemed to hope for alternatives. And so coming up as a new third party in that way, I think that actually was a disruption to the status quo. But at a certain point, he came to be seen as grandstanding on national issues rather than paying attention to very local mayoral issues. And so then his rating fell dramatically.
The TPP's cooperation with the main opposition KMT and its pushing of controversial reforms has seen its popularity plummet. One recent poll showed Ke's Taiwan People's Party with an approval rating of only 6%. Even the party's apology press conference was disrupted by a protester. But just how bad is the political damage from these scandals?
And with Ko as the party leader, if he falls, then that party has no future. And that also does mean an end to his presidential ambitions. But it's also possible that this will become part of his political brand, that the controversy glance off of him, and he will manage to frame himself as being targeted politically by the DPP government in a way that benefits him.
Unpopular and facing criminal investigations, the question is whether Ke and his party, who only recently shook up Taiwanese politics, can put aside recent scandals. Or is this latest revelation too much to recover from? Alex Chun and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
A Taipei court has ruled against a transgender woman's request to change her gender identity on personal documents without undergoing surgery or a psychiatric evaluation. Irene Lin reports from the courthouse.
A setback for Taiwan's transgender community today, as the Taipei Higher Administrative Court has denied a transgender woman named Vivi the right to change her gender identity on government IDs without undergoing gender-affirming surgery or a psychiatric evaluation. This is what her legal team has to say.
那么律师团这一边，应该会针对这个判决去做上诉。因为我们还是认为在这个案件之中，我们的当事人其实，他也没有医疗上的需求。 如果强迫一个没有医疗需求的人去看医生，去拿证明，我们觉得其实是一件非常奇怪的事情。
The plaintiff Vivi was suing the government to waive the current legal requirements for her case. She insisted on providing only daily life photos of her and statements from her mother and friends as evidence. Her team argues that being transgender is not a mental condition. They say more than 20 countries, including Spain and New Zealand, have already granted individuals full freedom in choosing gender markers, and that Taiwan should follow suit. The judge says today that the evidence provided by Vivi is difficult to use an objective proof of her identity, meaning that some form of medical evaluation is still required. Now, this is just a ruling of a single case. There's no precedent in Taiwanese law, meaning that until the law is changed, each individual can fight their own case. But it's undoubtedly a big disappointment for those hoping this case could provide a breakthrough for Taiwan's transgender community. Many don't have the time or the resources to fight lengthy legal battles, and rulings like today's show that there are no quick fixes in gaining easy legal recognition for transgender people. Luffy Lee and Irene Lin in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
A labor rights movement started by firefighters is gaining momentum. Prison staff are the latest civil servants to join their calls for reforms. Their key demand is a law change that would give them the same workplace protections as ordinary workers. John Van Trieste explains.
Small but determined, a group of public sector workers gathers on this gray Taipei morning to air old grievances and make new demands. They represent a growing range of public employees who say they deserve the same health and safety protections private workers enjoy. With only a few exceptions, Taiwan's Occupational Safety and Health Act does not apply to civil servants. The government has made some concessions, at least for the firefighters who kicked this labor movement off after a fatal factory fire last year. But one firefighter here says that so far, changes to the law have been inadequate.
面对地方政府没有给我们消防员足够的装备时，没有罚则。再来，没有检举以及保护吹哨者的机制。这个消防法的治安篇章漏洞百出。
Police, legal clerks, and others say they're even more exposed, and the range of public workers calling for change is growing. Today, new allies, prison workers, are on the scene. They say that like the prisoners they watch, they aren't allowed air conditioning, all while having to walk the equivalent of 15 kilometers a day on patrols. And they say they face violence from prisoners and even revenge attacks from those who've been released. Prison staff have been assaulted with everything from chopsticks to hot water.
徒手啦，或是有些会持器具，比如说磨尖的筷子，或者是他们会藏一些地上捡到什么一些危险物品。 之后，他们会在地上这样整天磨成尖的。好，只要是任何塑胶物品或是一些稍微硬的东西，他们都可以磨尖做成武器，那会藏在身上。
Today, this group has proposed two small changes to the wording of the Safety and Health Act that would make it explicitly cover all public sector workers. TaiwanPlus reached out to the Labor Ministry's Occupational Safety and Health Administration and the Civil Service Ministry for comment on these changes, but didn't receive a response. While turnout has been small today, this group is trying to put pressure on officials to make sure the proposal isn't ignored. Activists here have organized a rally later this month that they say will be much bigger. So far this year, 10 police officers, 2 firefighters, 1 judge, 1 legal clerk, and 1 prison worker have died, either in the line of duty or from suicide. These protesters plan to mourn their fallen colleagues, but also to mobilize. John Su and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching Here's What Happened. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, let's take a look at these tiger cubs playing at a zoo in Germany. I'm Tiffany Wong. Take care and see you next week.